This episode of the Nocturnal Disney Podcast is brought to you by Palms and Parks. They are high-quality Disney-inspired t-shirts that have cool, fun designs and help show off your love for Disney in a unique and smart way. Visit them at palmsandparks.com and check out what their store has to offer. There's something there for everyone. The time is now, on an evening very much like the one we have recorded on. Tonight's episode of Nocturnal Disney is something unique. It calls for a different kind of introduction. This, as you may recognize, is a recorded podcast, still in operation, waiting for you. We invite you, if you dare, to listen through, because in tonight's episode, you are the star, and this show takes us directly to the Nocturnal Disney Podcast.
I'm bringing the party to you.
Look, I really don't want to hurt you.
I wouldn't stress about it.
Give it to Ronus so he can destroy the galaxy?
What are you, some saint all of a sudden? What has the galaxy ever done for you? Why would you want to save it?
Because I'm one of the idiots who lives in it!
Peter.
You have a metal arm? That is awesome, dude!
I wear 'em front. I wear 'em back. I go inside out. Then I go front and back.
Dad! What is this thing? Look how it thinks it's so cool. It's not cool to get help. Walk by yourself, you little gargoyle.
I'm glad.
I don't care.
You couldn't have done that earlier.
I hate you.
This drink, I like it.
I know, it's great, right?
Another!
Thank you for joining me for episode 5 of the Nocturnal Disney Podcast on June 9th, 2018. My name is Bryce. I appreciate you listening. If you want to join in our discussion, you can join me on Facebook. Just search the Nocturnal Disney Podcast and join our little group. You can email me at nocturnaldisney@gmail.com, and you can say something quick to me on Twitter at Disney Nocturnal. You can also find me on Instagram at the Nocturnal Disney Podcast, all separated by underscores. This is a very special week because I actually wanted to dedicate this episode to 3 friends of mine who just had children recently. My friend Jarika, who just had a beautiful little girl. Her name is Jazanae. My friend Manny and Veronica, who just had 2 twins named Manny and Sophia. Then my friends Scott and April are having a baby boy either tonight or tomorrow. It's very exciting, and I'm so happy for all of you guys, man. Congratulations. Getting past that, though, we actually have stuff to talk about this week. And when you're running a news-type podcast, that's kind of important. It always makes things a lot easier. We're going to talk about the newest Wreck-It Ralph trailer, a movie that I am not looking forward to at all. We're going to talk about early reactions to The Incredibles 2, and we're also going to get all caught up for next week for Incredibles 2 with a review of the first movie. But for now, let's just jump into it. Good morning. I'm checking in with the Midnight Report. Let's fire away. This show is about the parks as well as the movies, and unfortunately, the face of the Grand Floridian passed away on June 7th. His name was Richard Girth, and he was a greeter at Grand Floridian. It's really interesting to see how things in Walt Disney World take off. You know, certain cast members just take on a life of their own and almost become like celebrities. Richard had been at the resort since 1991, and it was interesting because people would come just to see him. They would make sure they would go in there with their kids and get pictures. And what's truly amazing is Richard, this beloved cast member, never even put in an application. And then 22 years later, he's receiving a Disney Legacy Award, which means even the cast members that he worked around all the time saw the difference that he made. He's going to be missed by a lot of people. You may have noticed from the intro that it's going to be a very movie-heavy episode today. Movie news, reviews, talk, debate. It's going to be great. Let's kick it off with this. On May 29th, Maleficent 2 started filming. That's very upsetting. It's been 4 years since the first one came out, and there were talks of a second one being made, but there was nothing actually really happening about it, and that made me very excited because I thought maybe it won't even get off the ground. Maybe they'll realize what a garbage film the first one was. maybe we'll never have to sit through another movie where a clear villain is retconned into a misunderstood hero ever again. But alas, it was not meant to be. And I'll tell you why it's getting a sequel too. It's because the first one made $758 million on a $180 million budget. So it made a good chunk of money. Ah well, I know that not every movie can be made for me, but it was just so depressing watching Maleficent be turned into a good guy. Like, why would you want to make that movie? It would be like watching the Joker go through the streets of Gotham and you realize, sure, he's a murderous, sadistic, homicidal clown, but dang it, he's got a heart of gold below that purple suit of his. Why? Why would you make that? I don't get it. And nothing about this movie was good. I didn't like the fairies. They were at least competent in the original movie, but in this, they were hazardous to Aurora's health. Now, I'll take that back. Actually, I said I didn't like anything about this movie. I actually did like Aurora, which is amazing because in nothing else have I ever liked the character. In the main movie, she's boring. I mean, to be fair, she's barely in the thing, but still, I think you get my point. And then in Once Upon a Time, she is awful. She's the worst. But whatever. But again, there's just nothing worse than taking one of the best villains Disney has ever made and rewriting her to be the hero. Oh, God, and don't even get me started on the ending of the movie and how Aurora ends up waking up. It's the most ridiculous thing I think I've ever seen. I almost walked out of the theater because of it. The only thing that stopped me was that I knew that the movie was just about to end, so I decided to stay. Now, Angelina Jolie and Elle Fanning are coming back, and Michelle Pfeiffer's been cast, and they have talent. Angelina Jolie is an award-winning actress. Elle Fanning is excellent. Michelle Pfeiffer has multiple Academy Awards. So it's not like the movie doesn't have talent. The talent is not the issue. It's the writing. It's the story. Don't make it. It makes me sad. I just have to understand that the movie's not for me and just deal with it, I guess. Oh well. But you know what was for critics? Incredibles 2. Some early showings of the movie have been happening, and the critics have been able to get on Twitter and Instagram and stuff and give their opinions, just not a full review. So let's read some of them. Scott Mendelson, he's a writer for Forbes. He also kind of looks like Will Arnett in his profile picture, but that's beside the point. He said, I spent 14 years arguing that the world didn't need an Incredibles 2. After tonight, I would welcome an Incredibles 3 with open arms. Perry Nemiroff said, Incredibles 2 is such a friggin' delight. Family dynamic is brilliant yet again, but wow, is Jack a scene stealer. And that score, more A+ work from Michael Giacchino that I'm gonna need to own. That makes me happy. I really like Giacchino's work. He did Jurassic World, which, if anybody knows me, Jurassic Park is my all-time favorite live-action movie. And the music is no small part of that. It's freaking great. I love his Incredibles score too, but to date, I think my favorite score of his has got to be Inside Out. It's just so whimsical. It's really nice, man. I can't wait to hear what he did with Incredibles 2. Steven Weintraub from Collider said, so happy to report that Brad Bird delivered a fantastic sequel to The Incredibles. Absolutely loved Incredibles 2, and Michael Giacchino's score is, as always, awesome. Can't wait to see it again. Christian Harloff from Schmoes Knows said, man, Incredibles 2 was fantastic. It was fast-paced, full of laughs, action, emotion, and an awesome story. I really liked the first one. I loved this one. He wrote love in all caps at the end there, which means you know that that's legit. That is for real. He means that. Honestly, though, this makes me really happy because he kicked it up. He went from liking the first movie to loving the second one. I mean, how often does that happen? It's not often. Batman Begins to Dark Knight, Shrek to Shrek 2. People say Toy Story to Toy Story 2, but I'd have to disagree with that. But Be that as it may, this is super, super encouraging. I am so excited for this movie now. I mean, you get the idea here. People seem to really be liking this movie, and that makes me so happy. When a sequel comes out to a movie that everybody liked and it's just okay, it sucks, you know? You wanted a good movie. When a sequel comes out 14 years later to a movie that everybody loved and it's just okay, that is a catastrophe. That is horrible. I've seen the reactions, you've heard the reactions, and apparently so have a lot of other people, because Incredibles 2 just overtook Finding Dory as Pixar's biggest pre-purchase for tickets. And I know I added to that number last night. Here's the thing though, just because there's a lot of people buying tickets before the movie comes out doesn't mean the movie is going to do well. Doesn't mean the movie's even going to be good. The reviews tell me that. But, I mean, we just saw Solo doubled pre-sale tickets for Black Panther. Black Panther is still running. And honestly, I don't give Solo 3 more weeks. It should. It's a good movie. But Solo's not getting the support that it needs or really deserves. So here's hoping that Incredibles 2 does way better than Solo. Wreck-It Ralph 2 just keeps giving us great content to talk about. The first Wreck-It Ralph is full of Easter eggs from video games. Some were right in your face, you had like Bowser and the Pac-Man ghost, but others were more subtle, like they had graffitied Hadouken onto the wall leading into the Sugar Rush game, or an even more obscure one was that says Aerith lives, which is a character from Final Fantasy VII. That is one of my favorite parts of Wreck-It Ralph, and that's trying to catch all the different Easter eggs. They dropped a new trailer a couple days ago, so let's go ahead and listen.
Hey, kid! Wake up!
Ralph, what is wrong with you?
Start churning butter and put on your church shoes, little sister, because we're about to blast off!
Ralph, what is it you're trying to say?
We're going to the internet.
What?
Work it, make it, do it. Makes us get harder, make it
Ladies and gentlemen, I give you the internet!
Cool. Wow, look at all this stuff.
This is the most beautiful miracle I've ever seen.
Welcome to the search bar. What can I help you find today? Umbrella, umbrage, umami.
No.
Noah's Ark, no doubt. Nordstrom Rack. Ergonomics, Urban Outfitters, cool.
I'm pretty sure he's just trying to guess what you're gonna say.
My autofill is a touch aggressive today.
Let me try. Take me to a website that's super intense and really nuts.
Oh, I only found one result.
Oh, come on. Princesses and cartoon characters barf.
Hey.
Whoa! Cool!
You're coming with us, kid.
Hi. Whoa, ladies, I'm a princess too.
What kind of a princess are you?
Do you have magic hair?
No.
Magic hands?
No.
Do animals talk to you?
No.
Were you poisoned?
No.
Cursed?
No.
Kidnapped or enslaved?
No. Are you guys okay? Should I call the police?
Do people assume all your problems got solved because a big, strong man showed up?
Yes. What is up with that?
She is a princess.
Ralph breaks the internet.
Shouldn't it be Ralph Wrecks the Internet?
Yeah, since he is Wreck-It Ralph.
Yeah, but break the internet, it's like a thing.
Right, it's just Wreck the Internet kind of sounds better, doesn't it?
You're not wrong.
The jokes landed a lot better for me in this trailer than they did in the last one. I love that scene where Ralph says, "The bunny gets the pancake," and then it explodes. Hysterical. But the sorrowful kitten thing, it didn't hit me all that hard. It was funny, just not as funny as Disney wanted it to be, I feel. But in this one, I love seeing Ralph trying to show excitement to Vanellope and get her excited as well, but it just goes way over her head. It made me laugh. It shows how different these two characters are, but they still love each other, man. They get along so well. Once you get into the internet and you see all the big names, it did start to worry me again, just because that stuff on the internet, it doesn't have the same lasting appeal or nostalgia that the video games have. They just don't. With video games, they were working with a proven quantity. These old games have been around for a while and people still love them. Now you have characters like Bowser and Zangief, they cross generations, and they'll be around for a long time. I just hate for this movie to date itself right off the bat when it doesn't have to. At the same time though, it doesn't look like they're going to be using those big names in the story, and that's really, really encouraging. They go to a search engine, it's called the search bar, powered by Knowsmore. It's funny. They could have gone to Google or Yahoo or even Bing, but no, they didn't, and I like it. I think it's great. Vanellope ends up making it over to ohmydisney.com, and it is a cluster of Easter eggs. Right off the bat, you see all the princesses, then you see Eeyore, Iron Man comes flying by, possibly picks up Vanellope, I'm not sure, and you see the rest of the room, and from left to right, you have the House from Up, the Muppet Show, a giant Kermit head, I believe a poster from Big Hero 6, the Millennium Falcon, the Death Star, R2-D2's there, then you have Mickey Mouse standing on top of a giant sorcerer's hat. Mickey's dressed in a sorcerer's robe. The giant sorcerer hat says Disney Animation on it. Dumbo's standing below that. You see Iron Man's glove, Cap's shield, you see Mjolnir, you see the Infinity Gauntlet. If you keep going, you see Big Ben, which is probably a reference to Peter Pan or maybe Mary Poppins. I mean, that is the next Disney movie that's coming out after Wreck-It Ralph, and that wouldn't surprise me. I know with John Lasseter being the head of Disney right now, he really likes to reference the next movie coming out. Though Mary Poppins isn't an animated movie, so I don't know. We'll see. Then, right of Big Ben, you have Eve from WALL-E, you have the Luxo ball and lamp and the wallpaper from Andy's room. Then, after you take all that in the matter of a second, a TIE fighter flies by and it's being chased by an X-Wing and they're in a dogfight. Stormtroopers attack Vanellope, and that leads to the best scene of the trailer. It's where Vanellope gets to meet all the other Disney princesses. What a wonderful scene this is. It's just so funny. All the princesses immediately turn to attack. Jasmine's holding the genie's lamp like a gun. Pocahontas has a shillelagh. I don't know if it's called a shillelagh in the Indian culture or not, but I only know it from the Irish culture, so it's a shillelagh to me. But Cinderella's the best. She takes her glass slipper, boom, breaks it over a chair, and she is ready to straight up stab Vanellope. It is fantastic. What's really cool is that they got most of the princesses' original voices to come back for the movie. Now, I'd heard about this scene months ago because it was played at D23, but actually seeing it play out, more or less, it works so well. It works so well. It's great. Now, this is a Wreck-It Ralph movie, and I say that because Wreck-It Ralph has his own style and his own look. And the same is true of all the other Disney movies. None of them really look the same. I mean, you can say that like the big five, Mickey, Minnie, Pluto, Goofy, Donald, all of those, and even Chip and Dale, all look like they're in the same universe, and they do, but Sleeping Beauty doesn't look like Bambi, and Alice in Wonderland doesn't look like Snow White. They all have their own distinct styles, right? So when you bring all the princesses in from their movies, for consistency, you have to do them in the same style as Wreck-It Ralph. It's his movie. It makes sense. The CGI princesses all look practically the same, right? Merida, Rapunzel, Elsa, Anna, Moana, all very similar. You can tell it's not their original design, but it's very, 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 very close. The 2D princesses, on the other hand, Belle, Ariel, Aurora, Snow White, Jasmine, Pocahontas, Tiana, and Cinderella, look very different. You know immediately who they are. There's no question about that. But they still look different. They look off almost somehow. I think Snow White looks the most different, and that makes sense. I mean, she's being updated almost 100 years from 1932 until now. Since they are all in Wreck-It Ralph style, they all have larger eyes, a somewhat smaller mouth, but their ears. Their ears are distinctly larger. There is no question about that. And some people really hate this. They don't like the look of it at all. I think they look fine. But the one that looks the oddest, in my opinion, is Cinderella. And someone on Facebook did a side-by-side, and it's immediately obvious why the Wreck-It Ralph version looks so weird in comparison to the original. And it's because the original Cinderella has no ears. All you see are her earrings, but that makes for a really strange effect. So when you see her with ears, it's very jarring. I can't wait to see how much the princesses are actually in the movie and how much they're going to affect the movie. I'm very excited about this. The last thing I wanted to talk about before we get into the feature presentation is Rose Tico from Star Wars. More specifically, I wanted to talk about Kelly Marie Tran, the actress who plays her. The Last Jedi came out in the middle of December, and this poor woman has dealt with racist and sexist garbage flooding her Instagram and her Twitter feeds ever since. She finally got fed up with it and deleted her accounts because she just couldn't handle the consistent attacks. Some of them were threats. We live in a world that's really strange now. We're all connected more than ever before. That's true. Some actors don't run their own pages, but a lot of them do. And you can go to their page and from relative obscurity just say whatever you want to them and they're gonna read it. Regardless of how mean or vile or nice, whatever, it doesn't matter what you want to say to them, odds are is they're going to see it. How would you like it if someone went to your Facebook wall and said, I saw Bryce today. Those pants are the worst thing humanity's had to deal with since the plague. Jeez. If it's one person saying it, you can brush it off. Screw them. But if it's thousands and thousands of people, that can be very disheartening. You think, why even be on here? It's not for any fun. I'm getting just blasted. And look, I've said things on Twitter to people and I immediately thought, I probably shouldn't have said that. So I'm not innocent, but it needs to stop. What does it gain you from bullying someone like that to the point where they leave social media? That's how a lot of people keep in touch with families. And these idiots got her so upset and so mad that she up and said, you know what? I'd rather not keep in touch with friends and family than put up with this crap. It's not the only way to keep in touch with family, obviously, but it's clearly the most convenient. This puts me in a really awkward position because I did not like her character in The Last Jedi. I think Rose is possibly the worst part of The Last Jedi, aside from that Canto Bite scene, which she's all over. But that's neither here nor there. That's not Kelly's fault. She played the character as written and as directed. And if you have a criticism or something like that, make it known. That's cool. That's good. But don't attack the person for it. It's weak-minded. Oh, you didn't like the performance? Why not? Well, it's not the performance so much as you. If you didn't exist, then I wouldn't have hated the character as much. Come on, people. If you like Star Wars, be a fan of it. Talk about what you like instead of hating and fixating on the things that you don't.
And now, our feature presentation.
All right, we have less than a week for The Incredibles 2 to come out, and so let's look at Incredibles 1. The Incredibles was written and directed by Brad Bird and stars Craig T. Nelson as Mr. Incredible and Bob Parr. Samuel L. Jackson plays Frozone and Lucius. Holly Hunter plays Elastigirl and Helen Parr. Jason Lee plays Buddy Pine, Incrediboy, and Syndrome. And possibly most important of all, Brad Bird plays Edna Mode. And it's also scored by Michael Giacchino. It starts out with an interview of Mr. Incredible, Elastigirl, and Frozone. And it's interesting to see how the movie shows them younger at the beginning. Mr. Incredible says that he wants the simple life, to settle down. Elastigirl says the exact opposite thing. And Frozone wants to be with another super. And then once you cut to the main storyline, which is 15 years later, they all end up wanting the exact opposite thing. The superhero relocation program forces Mr. Incredible to settle down and lead a simple life, and he hates it. He's miserable. Him and Elastigirl end up getting married during that first scene, and she seems to really enjoy the calm life and is really making the best of it. And Frozone, Frozone ends up with a non-super, and we know that because at the end of the movie, one of the best lines in the entire movie is between him and his wife, and she's not suiting up. She could care less about what's going on. Her whole worry is her dinner and how her dinner is in danger. I love that scene. Now, forcing superheroes to retire and live only by their secret identities is not a novel concept. If you read comics, they've done the story quite a few times, actually. It's the inciting incident in Watchmen. Marvel had their big Civil War crossover, and that was the same thing. It was called the Superhuman Registration Act and that. So while it's not a new idea, it's still a good idea, and it's an interesting way to have a story about a midlife crisis and what that can end up doing to a family. The movie jumps ahead 15 years into the 50s, and one of my favorite scenes happens pretty quick after the jump. They've been in hiding for a long time, so they're used to hiding their powers. We get introduced to Dash, and he's in the principal's office for allegedly putting a tack on the teacher's seat. And what's funny is Helen believes the teacher. She knows Dash did it, but she can't scold Dash because that would out him as having superpowers. I just think that's an interesting problem to have. And it's funny because they're arguing in the car, and Dash says, "You always say do your best, but you don't mean it," which is very similar to Incrediboy saying, "You always say be true to yourself, but you never say which part to be true to." So Helen says, "Everyone's special, Dash." And he comes back with, which is another way of saying no one is. Syndrome says the same exact thing later on in the movie. Dash and Syndrome remind me a lot of each other, and I don't know if that's by design or not, but it ends up showing the different routes people end up taking based on their situation in life. Dash was held back, sure, and that was annoying to him, but Buddy was outright rejected by Mr. Incredible. That rejection turned to resentment, and then to him being a full-on villain. And the car scene is just another example of how detail-oriented Pixar is. They could have left Jack out, and I doubt anyone would have said anything. But no, you can see his little head sticking up in the back seat, and every once in a while you hear him coo. That's great. So good. So Lucius ends up coming over because him and Bob go bowling every Wednesday night. But what they're actually doing is they're going out, listening to a police scanner, and stopping crimes. This is when we're introduced to Mirage, which is Syndrome's assistant. She's tailing Lucius because she knows that he's Frozone, but they have no idea who Bob is. Bob and Frozone hear about a fire and they leave to go help. They put on ski masks to hide their identity, which is the wrong thing to have done. Because the fire ends up getting so bad that the building starts coming down around them, and Bob goes crashing through a wall and into a jewelry store. Frozone shouting at him, "We look like bad guys, incompetent bad guys." Really, Edna Mode and Frozone have the best lines in this movie. They get away from the cops, and Mirage switches targets because she realizes that Bob is Mr. Incredible. Lucius drops Bob off, and Bob's sneaking into the house like a little kid, and it leads to him and Helen getting into a fight. Not just a fight, they get into a big fight. And it's the first time in the movie that we really sense that there might be something wrong with Bob and Helen's marriage. Bob says, "I told you I'd be back late," and she comes back with, "I'd assume you'd be back late if you came back at all." And just through the conversation, she finds out that he's been moonlighting hero work and listening to the police scanner, and she is not happy about that because they had to be relocated a few times even before this incident. Now just think about that for a minute. Personally, in my adult life, I've moved 4 times. In my entire life, I've moved 7 times. And every time, it's a nightmare. Imagine just getting settled and you have to pack up and change schools, probably change your last name, change friends, all because someone in your family does something stupid. I can't imagine how frustrating that would be. And so I can understand why Helen would be so mad. She just wants to live a stable life and give her kids a stable life, and she's trying, and it almost feels like Bob is working against that actively. Pixar is so good with their storytelling, but with their visual storytelling, they just knock it out of the park usually, and they definitely do it in this scene. Because we see Violet and Dash kind of just sneak into the room, and we can see that they're concerned and worried because we can see it. It's on their face. They don't have to tell you, hey, we're worried about what's going on. You can look at them and know that they're upset, which is great. And just like any good family argument, they kind of skirt around the issue. Bob said, wow, we're just having a discussion. Violet says, oh, pretty loud discussion. And it's just such a great scene because Bob has legitimate points. He says they keep coming up with new ways to celebrate mediocrity when he's talking about how he doesn't want to go to Dash's graduation ceremony, even though it's just a ceremony of him going from 4th to 5th grade. I think that's great. And they're still kind of doing that with like participation awards and stuff. Granted, I've been out of school for a while now, so I don't know if they're still giving those out, but I know they were when I was in high school. I just personally thought it was the dumbest thing. And I always find it interesting when an animated movie talks about subjects like that, and Pixar's great at it. They really excel at talking about topics that would not typically be in an animated movie. Because the thing is, they make movies that kids enjoy. They don't make kids' movies, and that's really freeing. It lets them write scripts about so many different topics, like this. It's a movie about a midlife crisis, but when I was a kid, I loved this movie. Not because it was about a midlife crisis, but it was because it was full of action and lovable characters. It was funny. Now, since I'm older, I can recognize the different themes of the movie. You can see that their marriage is breaking down, and you can see that Bob is frustrated with work. You can see that Helen is frustrated with Bob, but she's trying to make the best of it. It's just so well written, man. So Bob gets offered a job by Mirage to take down a highly advanced robot, which ends up being called an Omnidroid. It got loose on their island, more hero work. That's what Mirage tells Bob. She also tells him that it pays 3 times his annual salary, and that's very convenient because he, that day, got fired from Insuricare. So, instead of telling Helen that he got fired and have to relocate again, he lies to her and says that he's going to a conference for work. Now, The Incredibles takes a page here from the Jaws playbook. They show the things the villain does, they show things around the villain, they show conversations that he's having with other characters, but they don't show the villain. Not really. They keep him in the shadows. Now, since this movie isn't focused on the villain the way, say, The Dark Knight is, it makes the villain intriguing, but it keeps the focus on Mr. Incredible and his family. That's, again, just good writing. After he takes out the robot on the island, there's a montage of him getting back in shape, getting a sports car, flirting with his wife again. He just seems more happy. He ends up getting another job from Mirage and goes to see Edna Mode, who is the one who made his suit for him back in the day. She's also probably the best part of the entire movie. She's primarily based on the real-life costume designer Edith Hunt, and in the movie she stands probably 3.5 feet tall. She's got all the best lines. She's, no capes, go, fight, win! She's just so funny. Oh my God, I love her. Now, the thing is, people think they're very good at lying. And when you think you're very good at something, you get complacent and you get a little reckless, let's say. That's what ends up happening with Bob, because Like I said, he's been lying to Helen and getting away with it. So the phone rings and he's like, don't get it, I got it, don't worry, which makes Helen a little suspicious. So she jumps on the phone with him, hears Mirage's voice, then she finds one of Mirage's long hairs, obviously doesn't know it's hers, but then she confronts Bob about it. He tells her, hey, I got another conference, so he's keeping up the lie. And then the final piece kind of falls into place. Helen starts to think that Bob's cheating on her, so she does a little detective work, and she realizes that Bob's had his supersuit patch, and she knows that Bob would only let Edna ever mend his supersuit. So she calls her, Edna fast talks her into coming over, and then we cut. We go back to the island, and Mr. Incredible is attacked by the Omnidroid in the conference room A113. And that's interesting because it's an Easter egg. It's in almost every one of Pixar's movies. A lot of times it comes up as a room number or something like that. And in this one, it was a conference room. A113 is the classroom where a lot of the Cal Arts animators took their classes. We finally meet Syndrome, and he goes at Mr. Incredible hard. He throws him across the island. Once he gets away, Syndrome tries to blow him up with a bomb from his gauntlet. Mr. Incredible hides behind the body of another super, and Syndrome thinks he killed him. And the movie cuts back to the mainland where Helen ends up meeting up with Edna. Edna tells Helen that her and Bob have been working, and Edna's made super suits for the entire family, and Edna tells Helen that she put a tracking signal into the suit. She asks him, do you know where Robert is? So Edna put a little bit of doubt in Helen's mind. Helen starts to get worried. She starts calling around. She calls InsureCare. She finds out that Bob was fired almost 2 months ago. And understandably, she thinks that he's cheating on her. I mean, she heard Mirage on the phone. She already found one of Mirage's hairs. She thinks Bob's cheating on her. I mean, honestly, that makes moonlighting hero work almost inconsequential, you know? So Edna talks Helen into turning on the tracker to find out where Bob is. By this time, Bob had snuck into Syndrome's base and found out his plan, but when the tracker went off, it triggered the security system in the base, and Mr. Incredible got caught. Helen is pissed. She borrows a plane from a friend and leaves Violet in charge of Dash and Jack-Jack. And what ends up happening is Dash and Violet end up stowing away on the plane with Helen. They were able to use the supersuits. Dash's supersuit can withstand a lot of friction. Elastigirl's can stretch as far as she can, and it's basically invulnerable. And Violet's can completely disappear, which is cool. So Helen had no idea the kids were on the plane. Elastigirl starts to approach into the island. She's requesting permission to land, so Syndrome tries to blow her out of the sky. And this is when Helen finds out that the kids are on the plane. And it's great because I remember having conversations with my mom blaming my brother for something while he does the exact same thing at the exact same time. It's really funny. It's cool because with this movie, you have so much that you can relate back to your own personal family experiences. It's really good. Now, since Violet was in charge of Dash and Jack-Jack, she got a sitter named Kari to watch the baby. Helen calls her and says that she's going to call a service, but Kari tells her that she's got it under control, not to worry. And they couldn't really argue because at that moment, the missiles that Syndrome sent are about to hit the plane. Mr. Incredible is bargaining with Syndrome, trying to get him to call off the attack, stop the missiles, and then he finds out at that moment that Dash and Violet are on the plane, and the plane gets hit. So Elastigirl, Dash, and Violet all die. They all blow up over the ocean. That's what Mr. Incredible thinks anyway, and so does everybody else in the room. Mirage is cool with killing people, but when it comes to killing children, she does not like that at all. So Syndrome's taunting Mr. Incredible about his family. Oh, well, they're dead, doesn't matter, you liked working alone anyway. And Mr. Incredible goes to grab him from behind. Mirage pushes him out of the way, and he grabs her instead, and he's threatening to kill her, snap her in half. Syndrome calls his bluff, he lets her go. And really in this scene, Syndrome destroys what relationship he had with Mirage because he just gambled with her life, and she takes that, very unsurprisingly, very personally, and that ends up coming back to bite him in the end. Now, obviously, Dash and Violet and Helen don't die. It's actually one of the best scenes when showing off their powers because it's so creative. When they blow up, they all fall out, and Helen ends up turning herself into a parachute and just slowly dropping them safely into the water. Then once they're in the water, Helen transforms her body into a boat. Dash hangs off the back and kicks, and they form a little motorboat. It's great. Violet sits on Elastigirl's back, and just away they go. I like how Dash and Violet have to deal with the fact that for 15 years they've been told not to use their powers. Don't do what makes you special. Stay hidden. Don't let anybody know. Now, in a matter of a few hours, they're being told to use their powers if anything starts to go wrong. And we see how that actually messes with Violet when she can't make the shield for the plane, because Helen wanted her to create a shield to go around the plane to protect them, but she couldn't. She was freaking out. She's like, you told us never to use our powers and this, and then the plane got hit, right? So now they're on the island in a cave. Helen's telling them, listen, use your powers. If the villains see you, if the bad guys see you, they will kill you. It doesn't matter that you're kids. They're going to kill you. Don't give them that opportunity. And to that end, it's very interesting to watch her throughout this movie. At the beginning of the movie, she says, what do you know about normal? We act normal. I want to be normal. And through the majority of the film, she has her hair in front of her face, kind of hiding behind it, you know? Then by the end of the movie, she's way more comfortable using her powers. She's way more confident. She starts wearing her hair back because she doesn't feel like she needs to hide anymore. Aside from Mr. Incredible and the obvious arc that he goes through, Violet is the other character that really has a large character arc and change. It's great. So Syndrome sends the Omni Droid to this city while Helen is trying to break Bob out, but Mirage beats her to it. She tells Bob that her family's alive. He hugs her out of just relief, and that is the moment that Helen finds them. Helen proceeds to knock Mirage out, and Bob starts to explain everything. Then we get a chase scene through the island as goons chase Dash, and he's holding his own. It's great. He blows up 3 or 4 of these piloted drone things. I also like that the goons aren't completely inept. The one who's trying to kill Violet throws sand on her to try to find her, and that's great because most of the time, the goons are just completely idiotic. They have no idea what they're doing. Dash attacks him, and once he turns on Dash, Violet jumps in to save him, uses a force field, and ends up hamster balling him. So they take off. She's hovering behind him. Dash is running at super speed and just bouncing off trees and rocks and stuff because he's got the force field around him. He literally runs over his parents who are running through the jungle trying to find them. Unfortunately, things go wrong very quickly and they all get caught again, basically immediately, but break out again just as quickly. That is one of 2 things that I don't really like about this movie. They go from Bob being captured to being released to immediately getting captured again to immediately getting released again. It's a little redundant, and I just don't think it needs to be there, but whatever. It's a minor thing, really. Mirage ends up catching them in their breakout, but instead of stopping them, she helped them because, like I said, Syndrome burned his bridge with her. So they end up dropping into the city from a rocket in a Winnebago. Just when you kind of start to forget that, hey, this is a movie about a family, they start in with the family jokes again, like Dash whining, are we there yet? And Bob saying, we'll get there when we get there. Then once they're back on land and on the highway, Bob and Helen start arguing about directions. It's great. It's just so funny. But then it's followed very quickly by the saddest moment in the movie. It's when Helen is telling Bob that she's going to help him fight the Omni Droid. And Bob says, no, you stay with the kids. I need you with the kids because I'm not strong enough to lose you again. That's so sad. Like, I think a lot of people can relate to that. You know, having a family member narrowly escape death or a sickness or something, and then you think they're gone, and then all of a sudden you have them back in your life. You're going to do anything to protect them and make sure that they're safe. But obviously Elastigirl and Dash and Violet all help with the fight, and the final fight happens. And of course, it's incredible. When Mr. Incredible remembers that the controller controls the robot, it's really good storytelling because it actually shows Bob remembering instead of just the movie saying, hey, that controls the robot. We get to see his memory. It's a movie. Show, don't tell, and of course, it was good. They destroyed the Omnidroid and head back home. Syndrome beats them home though, and he ends up kidnapping Jack-Jack, which he's made some mistakes in his life. This is clearly the worst mistake of his entire life. Jack-Jack's powers go haywire. He lights himself on fire like the Human Torch, turns metal like Colossus, and then turns into a giant purple gremlin thing like the Hulk. Jack-Jack just destroys Syndrome. He ends up getting away, and Mr. Incredible throws a car at Syndrome's plane, which knocks him into the turbine, killing Syndrome. It's sad, because Syndrome is a really good villain, and I would have loved to see him in Incredibles 2, but it's nice too, because he's such a jerk, and it's nice to see him get his comeuppance, you know? Everything gets wrapped up, and we cut to Dash actually getting to compete in a track meet. He ends up coming in second, because he, just kind of maneuvered things that way. And as they're walking out, the Underminer attacks. He declares war on peace and happiness, which is really funny, and the movie ends. And that's really cool because that's where Incredibles 2 is supposed to open. I can't wait. I love when movies do that. And that's The Incredibles. I love this movie. It's so good. The character design is great. The animation is obviously flawless. The only real issue I have, aside from that one repeat in story beat, is that when Pixar made this movie, they hadn't really gotten the texture of human flesh down very well. So watch this and then watch Brave back to back, and you'll really see what I mean. Because The Incredibles, even though it's in a cartoony world, they still at times look plastic. It's actually why they made Toy Story first, because everything was plastic. But, other than that, that's a nitpick, really. This is basically a flawless movie. I'd give it a 9. Easy. 9 out of 10. The writing is quick, the jokes are witty. It's just a delight. And that's the end. For this week anyway. I wanted to thank you all for listening, and you can find me on iTunes, YouTube, Twitter, Tumblr, and SoundCloud. You can also find me on DigiFox Studios' new network, the Fox Playbox. Just type in foxplaybox.com and you can find all the shows in our network. If you would be so kind as to like, favorite, and subscribe, I would greatly appreciate it. It does help me get up through the ranks so more people can find my show. Don't forget to head over to the Facebook page or my Instagram page and participate in this week's Disney Duel, which is going to be, how do you feel about the redesigned princesses for Wreck-It Ralph 2? Do you prefer the originals, or do you like seeing the change and think it's interesting? Last week's challenges were the Fantastic Four versus the Incredibles. I thought it would be at least a close battle. It wasn't. It wasn't even close by a mile. The Incredibles won out 38 to Fantastic's 1. Ouch. Thank you everyone who decided to play, and I greatly appreciate it. And that's going to do it for tonight. Thank you so much for listening, and until next Saturday, this is Bryce saying have a good night, and may all your endings be happy. And, well, you know the rest.